Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. Today I'm joined by a man who is best known as a podcaster, YouTuber, and a fearless advocate of less popular sugary treats. Welcome to the show, Mister MacNugget.
I'm just taken aback by the professionalism here. I don't feel like I belong, so thank you.
Oh, don't worry. I will screw that up in short order, such as when I mispronounced Piz's name immediately upon introducing him to his show.
So how did you pronounce it? I want to know.
Oh, I can't even tell you. I just stumbled right out of the box. I think it came out as like Mr. Peanut. I don't know. And it's like, I don't rehearse, as everyone can tell. And it just becomes a situation whereas whatever my mind thinks my lips do, which has gotten me in trouble in my real life. I'm only waiting for the explosion to happen when I really stumble across something even worse. So we have about 12 in the audience at the moment. They're filing in, and just going to say hello to a few. Hey, Al. Hey, Jeff. Let's see who else. Hey, Steak Sauce. DJ Donnelly. Lost Cunningham. See, these are the guys who speak up. We need some more voices to be loud and proud on the channel.
Yes. The vocal majority here, they have a lot to say, but it's always enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if these are the guys that show up to vote, this is where our leadership comes from. So if you're out there and quiet, you need to make some noise. Don't let yourself get drowned out. Hey, Steve. Hey, Rush's Ashes. How are you? So you and I go back about a year. I can't pinpoint exactly where. I know that you had been in some chats that I was in, but I was fairly oblivious to you as a personality outside of chat rooms or chats and under videos. And then you came into my radar when you posted on Twitter a statement and a video that accompanied it, stating that red vines were clearly superior to Twizzlers.
Clearly.
A statement that I wholeheartedly endorse, and I can't really understand how anyone could see it any other way. But I will say this: it's difficult to find red vines in movie theaters. For some reason, those theater managers are all in with Twizzlers. I don't know if it's some sort of conspiracy to turn a generation against us or what, but our fellow moviegoers are stuck with Twizzlers.
It's one of the biggest issues in the world today. No sarcasm there. I mean, the type of red licorice flavored candy that you consume, it says a lot about you as a person. A soft, fresh red vine is easy to bite into, to chew. The flavor just fills every crack and crevice of your dental region, and you just enjoy it longer because of that. And even the freshest Twizzler, the freshest one, is still a chore to bite through. It just is. It's not the same texture. It's not the same feel. And I hear people say it's waxy. There's a waxiness about a red vine. And how could anyone say that, comparing the two candies, that red vines is waxy? I don't get that at all. Have you ever eaten a crayon? Have you eaten a crayon before?
Who has not eaten a crayon?
That's closer to Twizzler.
And I'm not even talking as a child. I'm saying recently I've eaten a crayon.
Well, you always want to bite the tips of them off because they're just too perfect. So you've got to wreck that.
Don't ask what an adult is doing buying crayons to begin with. It's a whole different issue. So I had friends over my house not too long ago, maybe 8 months ago, and I had bought these 2 large bags off of Amazon of the California mix from Red Vines. And it has the red, the black, which is hard to find, and then it has the cherry, which is ultra hard to find. and they come in a variety of sizes and shapes. And I brought them out, and almost everyone went red vines, and then they devoured the first bag in like 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, that speaks volumes.
I think it's one of those things that people have a preconceived notion, but once they actually dig their teeth in, it's a whole different thing. It's kind of like your first redhead.
It's it is weird because I think they see them as like a knockoff of Twizzlers as opposed to like the I don't even want to say Coke to Pepsi. I want to say like Pepsi to RC Cola. RC's good.
I love RC.
But people look at it and think that it's like a knockoff brand. Red Vines is not a knockoff brand. It stands on its own, and it stands taller and prouder.
And there's something to be said for the fact that, whatever the biggest guy on the block is, there's a reason it got big, but there's also a reason why the second biggest guy is always got its following. Because if that top guy was just the best, you wouldn't need a second. You just wouldn't.
Yeah, I agree.
So Steak Sauce asks, well, I'm sorry, the chat is moving. Lost Cunningham asks, but can you use red vines as a straw? Actually, sir, they're easier to use as a straw.
Yes.
If you bite off both ends, they're hollow.
And the opening is about straw sized. Truly. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm defending my red vines, but it is an actual straw when you bite the ends off. Totally.
And Steak Sauce says, oh, I had friends over. Right. He's only saying this because he's never actually been invited anywhere. He doesn't think that actually happens. And Christian Hanahor has joined the chat, and he's already chatting up and trying to, I think, pick up some of the other members of the chat. So good luck, sir. Hope it all goes well. It's a warm night in Louisiana. So, isn't this channel about movies or horror or something? Not really about sugary sweets.
I mean, I always have a point that I try to get to, and the trick I have is getting to that point. So you're not far off with me.
So, when I first encountered you, we had this exchange about red vines, which was an extremely positive. And the thing I discovered when I actually found your YouTube presence, because at that point they were mostly older videos. It was before you kind of reemerged from the bunker, that you dug out under your house in case of the zombie apocalypse.
Right.
And the first thing I was really remarked, you say, I'm not used to professionalism here, but here's the thing, man. You're the man with the radio voice, not me. I'm the guy who sounds exactly like I am. I'm just a kid from Jersey that listens to too much punk rock, has some hearing loss in one ear, and no hair left. You actually sound like that radio personality that could run, a cool smooth jazz channel in maybe Minnesota.
I do love some smooth jazz. I'm not going to lie. My wife and I visit the smooth jazz station once in a while on a Saturday night after we have some tacos. This is all pre-COVID, of course. But what's interesting is I did want to be a radio personality when I was in high school, but I convinced myself that there was no future in it. So I did not do it. And I do have some regrets there because I think it would have been something I would have pursued passionately throughout the course of my career, which I still do as a person who works with youngsters. I'm a Head Start teacher and a supervisor, but so I use some of those skills obviously in my daily life. But yeah, radio was something I wanted to try for sure. I did a lot of theater when I was younger too, college and high school. So there was a lot of I really wanted to get out there and do some radio, but alas, podcasting it was.
So that's where it started. Tell me about that, because I wasn't there for the beginning of your journey. And so what platform were you using at that point?
Well, actually, I didn't know where to start. So podcasting it was in 2013. I got with my cousin Josh and my cousin Dan, and then my brother Jared. We decided that we would just get together and do what everybody kind of does now. And not knocking it, if you find the right Shooting the Bull podcast, it's still fun to listen to. But that was our plan. We were going to talk about movies, and I had a feeling that we were going to stick more in the horror avenue. So we got together, and I didn't really know. I thought you could just record and upload it to something, kind of like a YouTube of the day. That's not how podcasting worked. Now, there are some places you can do that now, but what it ends up being is you need a RSS feed. And so I needed to find a service that would get my feed to, like the Apple Play and Google Play. Well, I don't know what it was called back in the day, but Apple was the main one, Apple Podcasts. And then there was like Stitcher and a few other ones. Now there's a gazillion. and you can be all over the place, which is awesome. But back then, we decided we were going to do it, and we plugged through and started doing it. Had no clue what we were doing, but we knew what we wanted to talk about. And so we sat down, and you're going to love this. We sat down. We called ourselves the B Team, and we talked about Rob Zombie's Halloween. That was the first thing that we did as a podcasting team. And I found out immediately after that B Team was taken, and I needed a new name. So I went back to the drawing board, and I got together with the cousins and the brother, and I said, what about if we just called it Idle Chatter? Because that's really what we're doing. We're just sitting around idly chatting about horror movies. So we did, and we just kind of came up with this black background image and put, that kind of Circus Peanuts font, Idle Chatter, on there, and we rolled with it and had a great time in the early days just hanging out. And that was really what it was. It was just hanging out with the brother and the cousins, and we had a good time, and it just kind of progressed from there.
So obviously the YouTube experience is so different. But you're going solo for one thing. That's a whole different thing.
Yes.
And you're also at a different point in your life, clearly. I mean, obviously you're very much a family man. You're very much a professional. So that has to put some hamstrings on some of the wilder aspects of what you probably initially were doing. I mean, I can't see Rob Zombie's Halloween is not exactly family-friendly fare.
Right. Well, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because as we progressed more and more, it kind of looks like you're wimping out of what you're trying to do to the audience that you're trying to capture by not talking about some of the more I don't know, risque is not a great word for it, but you know what I mean. The film that's a little bit more on the extreme side. And so it wasn't so much the films we were talking about, I found, that was the problem, though. It was, oddly enough, the gang around me, because we just started letting the words fly, the language fly. And then it got to the point where I'm like, I've got to be a little bit on the careful side here because of my professional life. I don't want to get to where, so-and-so's mom found me on whatever podcatcher she listens to, and wow, listen to this guy's mouth on the internet. Now, I've never have been a person that really kind of lets the bad words. You can tell a preschool teacher, but I don't usually. They're just not in my vocabulary because I'm in the habit of not using them because of the job that I have. So I think people got a unique voice in the horror genre from me because you're not either. That type of, I'm here to talk about why I like this stuff, and sometimes why I don't, and kind of left it at that. But I never let the language get too colorful because of habit, for one, and two, worried about somebody catching up with what in the world is this guy, who is this guy? Because they don't have context. All they hear is one clip of you on whatever podcast talking about X, Y, and Z, and you're not fit to be doing what you're doing, and it makes you nervous, I don't know. So that did kind of change things a little bit, and unfortunately, I'm grateful that it went in the avenue that it did. I still had the cousins on and the brother less frequently because he started working a job that, he was younger than us by 10 years. So, he kind of got into his job and moved on. But I started interviewing guests, and I was so excited about it, But it altered the fabric of the show a little bit. I mean, I had Adrian King on, and I had Tyler Main on, and I had Douglas Tate, the stunt performer that performed the water scene in Freddy vs. Jason, and he did Godzilla in the commercial for Snickers, and cool people. But it inadvertently changes your mentality of how you approach your show, and suddenly it becomes about keeping up with the Joneses, whether you intend it to or not. And so you go out trying to capture a guest because you've got to keep up with your own clout that you're chasing at that point. Not that we were ever super popular. I was blown away that Adrian King wanted anything to do with my little podcast. I mean, our audience was never enormous, but we got a few listens. I mean, we were building, it was growing, but the feeling of it wasn't the same. And I was trying to do, a weekly show with a new guest, but I wasn't just settling for guests that I would have a great conversation with. I was settling for a guest that I felt would bring an audience to me because of their following. That's the wrong mentality to have. I've learned that through time, that I would rather people come. This sounds really narcissistic, but I think you know where I'm coming from. I would rather have an audience that's coming to listen to me talk about whatever I'm talking about because there's something about my character they want to hang out with. And if I just so happen to have Adrian King on, who's amazing, that's a bonus. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to the only reason why you're here is for the guest. So I got to keep getting the guests because at that point, it's no fun anymore. I'm not enjoying myself.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said about the fact that Piz and I talk about this all the time. It doesn't really matter what the content is, and I don't mean that to disparage guests, but they show up for you where they don't show up at all. And that's just reality. There's too much choice. There's too much democracy of the marketplace. If and the live thing matters to a degree because like, people get the notifications that it's happening, but ultimately they have a lot of choices. And if they want to find Adrian King, there's a lot of videos of Adrian King, right?
Right.
So I think what I'm trying to do is balance both at the moment. I don't want it to just be about the guests, but by the same rate, I do want to build a community, and the safest way to do that is to bring people in looking for things. But that's going to be the tightrope walk. So your modern YouTube channel seems to be a blending of pop culture, including foods, with movies, culture, a little bit of social commentary. It's a big mixture of things. And I think it really represents your exact age group really well in a lot of ways. So how did you settle on that as your sweet spot?
To be honest with you, it was the interest factor for myself because I tend to be streaky in my my hobbies. So I put the new podcast in as a hobby podcast because the way I see it is the things that I'm doing are things that I dabble in, sometimes heavier than others. Like last summer when I first started talking with you on Twitter, I mean, I was on a marathon with movies. I mean, I was just watching movie after movie. I would finish one, start another one up. And while I still watch movies very frequently now, not like I was last summer. That was a streak I was on and I was riding that thing. But then I may get into this retro gaming kick where I'm playing some games for a while and really enjoying that. And it'll just kind of fizzle. And I think a lot more people are like that than what I think. Because I used to think it was kind of a me thing. And then I would make myself power through watching stuff that maybe I wasn't in the mood for. So I went with hobbies this time around. I figure it's whether it's a video or an audio podcast, maybe it's a topic that catches your ear. But I will tell you this, it does tend to be something that plays in the periphery of the movie world. If it's snacks, it's usually to do with, who doesn't have a Coke of choice at the movie theater or Red Vines or what have you? It's usually something that plays or promotional items that come out in the summer. I was really big into like hunting down Ecto Cooler one summer. And
I literally just watched that video like yesterday.
That's what I do. My brain's kind of everywhere. I think I still have the attention span of like a 4 or 5 year old, like I teach. And I think I see eye to eye because of that. I'm everywhere. There's not a whole lot that I have my home base that I always go back to, which is, the movies that we've talked about on like the Sausage Factory and stuff like that. The franchise movies that we all really seem to like to various differing degrees. And I don't know, podcasting allows me to be more adventurous in the things that I talk about, even if I'm not really, I may not have a whole lot to say starting out with an episode, but sometimes I go places I never would have thought. And I may even go off my outline completely. And sometimes those are the most fun shows that I put on a recording. So.
Yeah. I used to actually write my episodes and then I'd put the doc on screen. I basically was reading off screen, trying to glance up at the camera, back down to be somewhat engaging. What I discovered is, although I think the content was really very good, it wasn't engaging. And it seriously, me going off the cuff and just allowing my personality to be more of a guide, not that I'm going to win any personality contests, but people engage with reality much better than they do with like essay format. So like you, I think I might record for a half hour and cut it down to 9 minutes to get the good stuff in there, but it's all real. And I think that is very successful for me, and I think it plays better for any audience, to be honest.
You are a personality that knows what you're talking about when you talk about a subject matter, but one thing that I will say you have going for you is the fact that you're usually not talking about what other channels are talking about, that's what my pitfalls are. I tend to be, and probably no surprise to anybody who's ever watched The Sausage Factory, I know some deep cuts, some, but there's a lot of bread and butter type movies that I am well versed in, and if you go too far off the path, I will say flat out, I used to worry about that. Like, oh gosh, I'm going to look like a phony. No, I'm just being real to who I am. So when you say something on your show about an actor or a movie that I've never seen, I walk away with something new. And I think that's what your show brings to the table. I mean, look what came in today.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you have you cracked it open at all?
I haven't gotten a chance to. It literally probably 30 minutes before we started, it came to my doorstep. So, and I like the short story format because, again, like you said, the busy life. I mean, I can sit down and read through one short story and put it away for a little while and come back to it. And, I may not want to, but it gives me the leeway on that. So it was a perfect fit for me, and listening to her talk about it and you talk about it with her. So, yeah. Suggestions.
It's incredible. But what you talk about with movies is and I get plenty of other people telling me, you really should just cover the Halloween series in autopsies. Do that because people will get there, and I'll absolutely tell them they're absolutely correct, and then I'll go back to trying to convince myself to review, Night of Terror from 1933 because I care about that. To give you another idea, you want to see a movie? You just showed me a book that came today. I have a movie that came to me today. This is The Maniacs. I don't know if you can see it. Well,
right.
So this is a 1964 comedy, social satire, political satire from Lucio Fulci, starring Barbara Steele.
Wow, there's some heavy hitters in the genre there in a comedy.
Absolutely. So and it's nearly impenetrable by reputation. I haven't seen it yet, but it's nearly impenetrable to American audiences because it's about the the Italian politics of the time. But how can you ignore something like this? Now, no one on YouTube is talking about this movie.
No.
So to me, I might get half the views of that I'd get doing an autopsy of Halloween 3. That's reality. But I don't, and I'm not saying I won't do an autopsy of Halloween 3, but what I am saying is I hope to build an audience that'll say, okay, you've given us all the Fridays, all the Exorcist films. We're willing to trust you with an author conversation with an author like Kathy Koja or, the gentleman I'll have on next Thursday. Or a podcaster, whereas the conversation is just of great interest because it's about the community.
Yeah.
I want to build that trust so that hopefully we can go beyond those conversations that a lot of people are having. I mean, after I was told outright, hey, you know what you should do? You should just do a show every week right after Joe Bob about the titles he does. Give your take on them. And on one side of me, I was like, wow, I probably would get a lot of hits. And on the other side, I'm like, but you know what? How gimmicky is that? And that's not really me. That's me playing off of him.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to do what I'm interested in. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to, burst in the flames and be gone. That's fine.
And I don't think. So I started watching movies, and I promise this is going somewhere back to what we were talking about. But I started watching movies actually at my grandma's house on Saturday night with the same people I started recording my podcast with. And I'd go to bed oddly enough with this bowl of frozen fruit that you would usually use to make like a smoothie with, but I love eating it by itself. Big old bowl of this crap, and I'd sit on her pull-out couch because we each sort of had our own space. They were watching their own things. They sometimes would watch too, but that's where I'd watch Joe Bob on Saturday nights. And I never pulled the bed out. I just always kept it the couch. I can see it. I can smell the room I was in, and the position I sat on the couch. And I can remember all of the things that were in the little shelving unit that the TV sat on and all of that stuff. And that's really kind of where it started. And I don't know why I was lured to him when I was, but I was. And it's really kind of a snowball effect from there. I think watching a TV version of something let me know that I can get through it without not being able to sleep for a whole week. So then I started, I'd go to a friend's house, and at a friend's house, he had a copy on Betamax of the final chapter. And I remember the image on the cover, and it was just so it just hit so hard, that mask with the knife and the blood pouring out underneath it. And I thought, I've got to check this out. And so I asked the guy, we weren't going to sit over there and watch some slasher from the 80s. We were over there to play Sega Genesis and hang out and drink Mountain Dew and do the stuff that we did. I said, can we watch that movie? I want to check it out. Yeah, we'll check it out. Well, what do you mean? Well, I'm really not supposed to watch it, but we'll put it in when they're not watching us playing games in here. I'm like, okay. I probably only saw 20 minutes of the movie. Beeline for my uncle's house, who had it on a VHS. Stuck it in, watched the movie. I mean, it's just there. I don't know if it was because it seemed semi-forbidden, or if I was just trying to stretch to see how far I could go before I was officially scared. But it's like that roller coaster. You know, you get on the first one and think, I can handle this one, so maybe I can try that one. I can handle this one, so maybe I can try that one. You know, it's just I think just the community of having these people together and trying to recapture as an adult that same feeling of sitting on your grandma's couch with a big bowl of frozen fruit. I may not have the fruit, I may not have the couch, won't be the same smell, senses, all that stuff, but there's a shared experience here that I think we have to have in some way, and I think people are always going to be kind of drawn to it, even though we're all very different. You know, that's wordy, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I got it exactly, except for the sense. I don't have a sense of smell, so I'll never have that. But did you say Betamax?
There it be.
There it is.
What is it? Creature from?
It is the great
Oz
Kinski feature Creature, an Alien ripoff, if there ever was, and a film that I saw probably as much as the original Alien growing up, though not on Betamax. I had a VHS copy. And it was, to me, even as a kid, I understood that it was not as good as Alien. But there was something about films that I recognized didn't have the means that really drew me. For the same reason when I discovered punk rock, I loved it. Because, yeah, the big 70s rock, you know, the arena rock of that time, it was real smooth and it sounded really compelling. But it also felt safe and a little bit drab. Not that Alien is safe or drab, but it's a studio film. And I always kind of loved the idea that there's people out there with less means making these films, because it kind of said to me, hey, when you find your place, you'll be able to do this. And I think that that's very analogous to what the whole podcasting YouTube thing is. You know, we're not Howard Stern. You know, we're not Opie and Anthony. We're never going to be. Well, you could. I don't mean to speak for you, but I'm never going to.
I agree with you.
But the reality is that doesn't mean our voices do not have some value. And I think that's not just true of you and I. It's true of everyone in the chat right now. It's true of everyone who stumbles across this video. It's everyone with a speech impediment who feels like they can't do this because they make fun of themselves. The truth is we all have value, and I think that's what this is all about. And I think the horror genre in particular is in a unique position to benefit from this, because horror is about what scares us, what repulses us, what frightens us, what we find sad. It's about the common experiences that we can't quite shake. So we all have flesh in that game. So I think the fact that you go on the air and talk about things that are shared experiences, your grandmother's couch, for my grandmother taking me to go see Friday the 13th, the final chapter. These are, even though they're different experiences, they bring us together in ways that it's hard to imagine anything else really being able to do. And that's kind of the magic of this one little genre that's so insular but so wide-reaching.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's so hard to put your finger on sometimes too. Like sometimes you really feel like you've got it. Like last summer when I was binging those movies like that, like I really felt like I was back in the pocket again. And then as life does, you kind of find yourself not so much in that pocket anymore. And if there's any advice I could give to anybody, and like Christian Hanna is a good example of this, you know, you're going after this stuff, you're doing it, you're passionate about it, and you're laying it all out there. But eventually time will come where you're going to get in this lull where you're like, you know, my views just aren't what I want them to be, because they'll never be what you want them to be. They're just not what I want to see currently. I'm not making content that I'm as happy with. I would just encourage you at that point. I mean, I think Piz is a very good example of this. Not only does Piz make good content, but he's consistent. He keeps pushing through, even when I'm sure he doesn't really feel like doing that next unboxing or review or whatever. Keep going with it, because what you'll do is you'll end up like this guy right here. If I would have kept Idle Chatter going and just went back to my original format, had the guest on once in a while, had a new talking head on with me once in a while, I would have 7 years of podcasting under my belt. Who knows how big the audience would be, but who cares? It would still be that outlet for when I needed it, when I was in the pocket. And in between, it would give you something to drive for when maybe you're just not feeling it as much. You know, I mean, life can be weird like that, but keep with it. keep putting stuff out there, because the people that are watching you right now, there's no guarantee they'll always be there. But I'd say they'd be more willing to stick around because they know you at this point, even if there aren't new people always flooding through the door. It's worthwhile. It's an outlet more than anything else. Just let it breathe. Let it be its thing.
So there is a little bit of age between us, not as much as not enough to be counterproductive to any kind of conversation about the genre. But I discovered a lot of films on UHF television. It sounds like you were more of a cable kid if you discovered Joe Bob.
Yep.
So I'm jealous, first off. So fuck you for that.
You're welcome.
And so where was that? Okay, let me phrase it differently than I wanted to. I feel like that we've lost something as the world has become less passive in how we get our entertainment. Now you click on something to enjoy it. And that works out great as far as access. But when you couldn't decide what was coming on, you had to kind of settle for what was coming on. It forced you to open your mind to anything that the programmer put on. Does that make sense to you?
Totally. Absolutely. I have a great example of that. I actually just got a micro SD card and loaded it up with every game from the Atari 2600 through the Sega Dreamcast. Here's the problem. Sounds wonderful. It is wonderful. Plays the games beautifully. I can't decide on one and stick with it because I'm not committed to any one of them, because I don't if you gave me a handful or even 3 NES cartridges and said, these are the games you're going to have for the next 3 months, I'd play all 3 of them through, and I could tell you the ins and outs of them, why I liked or disliked them. Whereas now, if you see the first 5 seconds of something and decide it's not for you, there may have been something 2 minutes down the road that would have hooked you, that you would have stuck with if you had not 7,000 other choices in front of you. It's crazy. I mean, it really is.
It's weird too, because there's a temptation to not appreciate what we have today because of that. As great as it was to be forced to have your mind opened as a younger person, I find myself nostalgic for things that are frankly ridiculous to be nostalgic for. And I try and fight it because I'm not a big fan of nostalgia. I'd rather talk about tomorrow and even today than yesterday. But when I watched the original Friday the 13th, one of my favorite films, and my second favorite slasher film of all time now, there's a weird moment that comes when Alice runs down that hill towards the dock and we're looking through the trees. It's not really a killer point of view scene, but it feels like it might be. But it's a static scene. In the old VHS and television prints, there was this horrific splice in the film. And it was this horrible white blotch that cut the screen in half very quickly, and it repaired itself and we went on. I can't watch the movie without that splice and feel like it's missing. So the imperfection I'm used to from my youth actually, I mean, if they were to make a edition of that film with the splice, I would buy it and probably watch it. And I know that's all kinds of wrong, but it's inescapable just because I feel like everything was so much more exciting when UHF was broadcasting movies and ABC's Movie of the Week was premiering all these 70s horror films in the early 80s. Everything was so exciting, and I'm desperate to recapture that.
Yeah, the event of things is not so much an event anymore, because you can always just catch up with it later, as opposed to if you didn't catch that when it came on, it was gone. Like, I can watch Joe Bob tomorrow, even though he came on last night, whereas if I missed a Monster Vision, it was gone. I mean, it was in the past. There was no going back to it. And it's weird. I did miss Joe Bob on occasion, obviously, and you really kind of had a sense of sorrow on Sunday morning about that, because you would never get that opportunity. But yeah, I agree. I actually recorded, strangely enough, I recorded Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas off the radio one time onto a cassette tape. And there's a little bit of static from another station that kind of clipped through in one particular point of the song. And I still hear that every time I hear that stupid song, every time. I
bought the 45 Graves album, Sleep in Safety, on cassette. That's my first problem. Through Enigma mail order back in the day, because you couldn't go to a record store and find it. And if you ordered it, it took just as long as if you ordered it yourself. So I ordered it. 3 months later, it comes in the mail. I put it in the player. That album starts with an announcer saying, this album was created by field agents in the life insurance business. and then this organ hits, and it's like, whoa, and this tape immediately broke.
Oh God!
So it being the 80s, out came the micro screwdriver. I pulled out all the screws, took it apart, taped it back together. I got my blade and I cut it so that it wouldn't catch. I mean, I did all the repair, put it back together, put it in, rewound it, started it over, and now it went wah. When I listen, yes, and that's exactly what it sounded like. So go ahead and play that a few times. When I listen to that album, it's weird that doesn't happen. I can't escape the flaw. That's my own damn fault because I never cleaned my tape deck.
It's part of it now. That's your experience with it. That's what you bring to it.
And that's why I think we were drawn to kind of these more underground films. And of course, the horror genre is rife with them. It's because the imperfections that exist in them almost become the point at a certain point, you know?
Yep.
I love The Godfather. I love The Godfather too, but there's something to be said about the fact that they're too perfect. I almost feel a little stale because everyone loves them. I'm a Jaws 2 guy. Jaws is a better film than Jaws 2, not by a little bit, by quite a lot. But if you ask me which Jaws I want to watch right now, it's going to be Jaws 2 every time. It might be a flawed film, but you know what? I love it. It's kind of like that thing. You might be able to marry a supermodel if you're real lucky. But wouldn't you rather have someone who you found interesting? And that's kind of what it is for me.
Yes, it is. There is a lot to be said for the why behind why you like something. That's the reason why it's hard. That's why it's good to find a film reviewer that you trust, because they're going to bring to the table a similar sensibility to the movie that maybe somebody would not. Like Chris Stuckman drives me nuts. You ever watch that guy? I mean, he's an all right guy. I think I would like him, like if I met him and interacted with him. But sometimes especially when he goes for the older stuff, like, I don't know, man. You've made it big, and I can tell. Maybe that's my own bias because he made it big, though. That could be the other piece of the puzzle. But
I know exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to even use Stuckman as an example. A lot of the larger channels, it's kind of codified at this point. They know where the safe point is, and they thread that needle. And that's a skill, dude. By the way, when you turn on NBC's nightly news, you want that person who can thread that needle. That's part of it, right? The stability. You don't want the big unexpected. I'm always going to be drawn to the unexpected. I'm always going to be drawn to the flaws. I'm always going to be drawn to things that are not perfect per se.
Yeah.
That said, I'm not a big fan of just surrounding yourself with junk cinema all the time. True junk cinema. We have to acknowledge that there's a difference between Friday the 13th, the final chapter, and Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. One of the films, objectively, and I do mean that word, is a better film than the other. And it's not hard to figure out which it is. Mm-hmm. So I think while it's cool for us to say, yeah, but I like New Blood.
Yeah, I do. Definitely.
You need to temper that with, okay, so of the two imperfect films, one is vastly superior. So I find myself never wanting to talk down to anyone about their opinion, but I always want to talk about, what the movie really is, what the book really is. For instance, I did the show with Kathy Koja. If you look carefully during that video, you'll see there is a single title I never mentioned to her because it didn't connect with me. I'm not going to say it's a bad title, but it didn't connect with me. So it would have been wrong for me to promote that when I could have spent my time talking about her great material. So it's kind of that feeling of what I try and bring to the show. I don't want to be positive just to be positive, and I'm not by nature, an optimistic person, but I would rather spend my time getting people to really notice something that I think is either overlooked, underlooked, or just off the radar. I can't tell you. I think every show I mention Game Over at some point. There's a reason for that. It's A, I'm a broken record, yes. B, I'm kind of fixated. And C, most importantly, it's a movie that needs to get notice. And I will fight for that notice, just like I'll fight for Kathy Koja, just like I will fight for Christian Hanna's show. Because I think his enthusiasm is exactly that we all need.
Yep. I completely agree. He doesn't know that I spoke of him before we even started tonight, but that enthusiasm is something that the community needs, because I think a voice like his will bring not only younger people to it, but people who, it's so easy to get hung on everybody saying that everything sucks. But if you talk about the things that you love and then say something sucks, someone's going to listen to that. Something sucks coming from somebody who's enthusiastic about the genre at the same time. It's the same reason why I love Black Sabbath, but some of the more modern music you would call heavy metal or thrash or whatever, all those subgenres of metal, I don't have a problem with them. I think there's a lot of good stuff there, but they play at this level the whole time. Whereas Black Sabbath would come in here and then it would go, and you would go someplace with it. And that's I don't know. I just think if you are one note all the time, people start to tune you out. So like you said, if you're all rainbows and bubblegum and lollipops all the time, people are like, oh no, he's going to say he's going to love it. I don't need to watch you anymore. Or that guy's going to hate it because he hates it. I would argue that the person that hates it is probably going to get a few more views over the lollipop and sunshine kind of guy, though, just based on human nature.
Oh, sure, because the thumbnail is going to be of Mike Owen.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. That's all you need.
Oh, yeah. But whereas, Christian show, he's going full bore after it, love it or hate it. And the enthusiasm packs a punch. You want to come see more.
Well, I feel like we both feel that we were Christian Hannah at some point, and that kind of helps. And that's not Christian. Please understand, that is not in any way to be taken as a suggestion that you're going to grow out of what you are. That's not what I am saying.
Yeah, please don't do that.
What I'm saying is the world beats the shit out of you, dude, and we're just jealous because you're still where you are. It's not about your opinion at all. It's about the fact that we love the fact that you discover. I talked to you like immediately after you saw House by the Cemetery for the first time. God, I would kill to be in that position, but I can't be. So it's great to see someone who is. I
didn't know anybody could carry the same type of enthusiasm, and I know that Christian, I'm sorry if I'm making you blush. I'm just complimenting all over the place. But that feeling of looking at a rack of VHS tapes at the rental store and being like, all this awesome art, I don't know what to choose. It all looks so cool to me, but I've got to pick one or two if I'm lucky one night, I didn't think that feeling would ever be captured again. So you found it somehow without being able to go to the mom and pop video store and make your 2 VHS tape selections. So, I mean, it's a good feeling. If you could put a lid on the bottle and keep it.
So Jamie has a question for you. She asks, what is your favorite off-the-wall guilty pleasure horror movie?
Guilty pleasure. Oh, man. It's hard for me to decide from the standpoint of guilty pleasure, because if I find it pleasurable, then I don't feel too guilty about it usually. I know that's kind of the thing to say. But I do like a lot of the 90s slasher movies that you seem to loathe. I think The Faculty is great, for instance. I really like The Faculty.
I love The Faculty.
Final Destination, the early ones. Yeah, there's some fun to be had there.
I love the second film. Absolutely love the second film.
Yeah. Trying to think. I mean, of course, I do like the Scream series, too, with the exception of 3 and 4. I still find fun. But I'll tell you, with Scream, I went to college when Scream 2 came out. Had a lot to do with it, Characters I already knew, going to college, new thing. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I know they're not really guilty pleasures necessarily, but that era of horror movies that seems to be, it's going to be a touchy topic with some of the older fans in the genre, because to them it kind of derailed the essence of what made them love it. To me, I like both. The stuff that came before it was great, but I liked it too. It also could have been those formative years, though, too, because I was junior high, high school, and then into my early years of college when those things were big. And that says a lot. So Jamie didn't ask me, but I'm going to answer anyway because I'm that full of myself. So there is a 1985 slasher film. Well, it's a slasher film the same way Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a slasher film, though you should not confuse the two. It's called Junior, and it is the definition of guilty pleasure. It's a film about 2 sub Playboy Playmate type fake stripper girls from prison who rent a cabin, and the local
developmentally disabled psychopath who is sent by his geriatric mother to go torment them, and the local sheriff is a scumbag. There's nothing good about the movie. It's so, for instance, if you love I Spit on Your Grave, it's because I Spit on Your Grave has a kind of EC comics morality story at its center, and a strange sort of exploitation feminism. Junior has none of that. Junior is just grade A exploitation crap. And if they put it on Blu-ray, I'm buying the motherfucking thing. That's all. That's it. So for those people who think that my problem with Friday 5 is the exploitation elements, no, that's not it.
It came up from you. I mean, I knew it would get back there somehow,
It always does. It always
all right,
does.
so I talked to you a little bit about actually deep sequels that are loathed by many in popular franchises. So I want to ask you first, because I'm going to bait you with mine. Okay.
Okay.
Do you have a deep sequel that's hated by many? I can't say all because there's never an all, but hated by most. Let's put it that way.
So
Popular franchise.
Popular franchise. So you're talking about the big guys is what
The
we're
big
coming
guys.
at.
Yeah.
So this is pretty easy for me. Halloween 5. Halloween 5 is unfortunate because it was rushed into production and then screwed with afterwards in the grand tradition of Halloween films. But it is a brilliant film in respect of it took the Halloween franchise and codified it as a fairy tale.
All right, now hold on. Stop. Hold that thought. Okay. I'm going to break the fourth wall here and tell everybody that we chatted to get everything set up before we started the show, and we were talking about what we were going to talk about, and I told him I was going to bait him with my choice because my choice is the one you just said, Halloween 5. I tweeted about this probably last summer, and I said Halloween 5 is the most like a Friday the 13th out of all the Halloween movies because really all the characters, with the exception of Jamie, are just there to be killed off. There's nothing else going on. They get rid of Rachel Carruthers right at the beginning, and then everything is just teenagers being teenagery and then going to a party and everybody dying. And you started talking about I know this is probably not where you want to go on your own show, but you started talking about this fairy tale aspect of this movie, and it kind of broadened my horizons on this movie. I never would have thought of any of this. I never would have pieced this together. But I will tell you, this is not just a choice because I knew you'd talk about it and have a lot to say, but this is a movie that I came home and watched. I watched with my cousin Dan, who was one of the podcast hosts, on a Betamax tape that was recorded off television. I saw it first there, and then it came on one of the movie channels after a indoor soccer game I had. So my mom and I watched it out in our living room one night, and I've always had a place. I was that kid with Halloween because I loved Halloween so much. I could piece together all the stories in my brain and make them work out, even though it's nonsensical that it can work out in continuity's sake, with the exception of 3. But I did, and so I love this one too. I felt this one, it had its own vibe. It didn't make sense how he could live with some hermit next to some tiny waterway for a year and then decide that one morning he's going to kill him and then run off and go back after his niece again. But whatever, But I like the movie.
So do you want my interpretation of that scene?
Yeah, I would love to hear it actually.
So obviously everyone knows that originally there was a different sequence, but the different sequence is not different thematically. The only difference is there's not a teenage punk rock voodoo priest keeping Michael alive. It's just a hermit living down by the river. I didn't write it. Don't hold me to that. But it sets up a visual language that evokes Sleeping Beauty, whereas Michael Myers is in the role of the sleeping princess, sleeping until he's woken, not by a kiss, but by the holiday itself, the time of the year. And what that does is at the end of the film, we go back to that imagery when Danielle Harris is lying in the child's coffin up in the attic of the house, and Michael approaches her. It's a reversal of that early scene, and it again is talking about Sleeping Beauty. I know I posted a still shot for you that compared the classic Disney version to it.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's crazy, and no one sees it because it's all happening thematically. It's not happening. The movie never tells you. And I feel like if it was made today, there would be some dialogue to tell you. Now, everyone in the chat is saying Lauren's full of shit right now. I guarantee it. But what I can give you one exclamation point to this. What does Jamie wear as her Halloween costume? She's dressed as a princess.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, there's the Rapunzel scene where we see her combing her hair in the window of the house, which the house is no longer a suburban house. It is a frigging castle.
It is. Yeah.
There's no real. I think ultimately, if the movie had gone through a few more drafts, it would be a tighter narrative. But as it stands, it's the most ambitious thing to be done with one of the major franchises by a director who had a great visual sense, but had a studio standing on his throat and not enough time or money to do what needed to really be done.
Yeah, he seems like an interesting dude. Dominique O'Thinning Gerard or something like that, I think is the guy's name. And it sounds like they pretty much partied on set. I mean, it sounded like it was just a party scene the whole way through, while they were doing that. But I still think the barn scene with Samantha and Spitz is one of the best lit shot slasher scenes. It just looks perfect. I mean, it's utterly perfect. I've always loved that scene, and not just because of why you would imagine, but it just is a great shot. And again, very Friday the 13th. Like, I mean, how many times have you been in the barn scenario in a Friday the 13th movie? But the movie just always had a good feel to me. I'm kind of about feel when it comes to movies, and it just felt good. But I never made that connection. And yeah, you can say, well, maybe Lauren's just reading way too far between the lines, but watch it again. That's all I can say. Watch it again, because it opened up a weird view into that movie that I never would have picked up on that. No way at all.
And to reverse your original question to me, so if we go back a film in that franchise, I'm not a big fan of Halloween 4. I like it, but it barely gets over the line from dislike to like. There's a lot of problems with that movie. And because it's such a literal reading of the material, like 5 is so much fantasy. Right from the beginning, it tells you, okay, we are not in a hard, fast reality. Okay, he sleeps for a year. Somehow, I guess the hermit is force feeding him through a tube or something. I don't know. But it's not reality, but it's again, that fairy tale logic, that urban legend type of behavior that the first film did so well. The first film is basically When a Stranger When a Stranger Calls, opening 15 minutes turned into a film. I mean, because there was an existing urban legend that built off of, both of them. So it gets back to that logic. But the fourth film insists upon being the realistic film, but then makes some horrifically unrealistic choices, like Michael hanging on the underside of trucks or throwing construction workers into power lines.
Thumbs through foreheads. Yeah.
It's just weird because the movie wants to be like what it thinks the first film is. But there's other things I don't like about the movie. I don't have a problem when once the rules were set for the other films to have to take that run with it. But Michael Myers' eyes got shot out in the second film. Can we all just kind of embrace the fact that he should be blind in 4? He should be blind.
Because they tried to address him being marred from the fire and things like that. So what I think happened was, because I'm going to start by saying Halloween 4, I love it. I love Halloween 4. It's
most do.
I don't want to say like a return to form, but that's kind of what they went for. And I think they succeeded, at least in my in my book, they succeeded on that front. But I think what you go for here is a decade later. No, 8 years later. Was it 8 years later from 2? I think 2 was 1980, and then 4 came out in 88.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think when you don't really have home video as much of a prominent thing at this time, you're hoping people just remember there was that big blow up fire at the end. And if we burn up Loomis and Michael a little bit, that'll be good enough, because people haven't seen these movies in a while. They remember the boogeyman. They remember how all that played out. And it still shows the first one and the second one, I'm sure, on TV at that point. But I guess you just have to kind of that suspension of disbelief thing. But yeah, the eyes being shot out thing was a tough thing to leave in the dust. But again, as a kid, though, I found a way of making it all make sense in my brain, and that was good enough for me. And it felt like autumn in the Midwest more than even the first 2 movies did, which I really appreciated, even though I know it wasn't autumn in the Midwest. But I like the neighborhood in it. I think it looks and feels really great. You can tell this is the way that I assess movies. It felt good. it felt right. It felt like Halloween to me. Whereas to you, it didn't feel anything even in the ballpark of right. So, I mean, tastes will differ, but that is a good movie for me.
Well, I think, and that's probably just how I'm wired. I am a how a movie feels. I'm an atmosphere and mood guy, but I'm also a writer, and I have issues with just lapses in logic. One example is, well, two examples actually simultaneously, is a dream sequence in which Jamie sees the shape before she sees the shape.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that scene is meant for the audience, not for the character. So it really doesn't work dramatically.
Yeah.
And then there's just the other side of that is that if Michael Myers escapes and he's going to go hunt down his surviving family members, not a bad idea, by the way. You have to do something else to get him to the town, to get him to the shoebox, to find the photo. It all just kind of falls into place really naturally in the film. And it just feels like, again, screenwriting. It's almost a Jim Cameron thing, whereas, well, if it doesn't work, we'll just put it real close together and we'll get away with it. We won't let anyone really think about it. It'll just happen. And I just hate that sort of storytelling because I think it's lazy. What I would have done one of two things with Michael Myers' eyes. A, my preferable version, he's blind. We believe that he can get shot 1,000,000 times and not die. Who cares if he doesn't have eyes? Have him do it all without eyes. Now, driving a car might be a step too far, but stalking people, having to do it by hearing, well, isn't that what Don't Breathe did so successfully? Couldn't that have been what Michael Myers became?
And if you start going with the force of evil thing too, what do you even need eyes to find his prey?
Right.
Like, what do you need senses at all? Is it just some thing that's otherworldly? I don't know. Possible.
And it has the other thing I always felt is like my reading of the character, and it's personal, but is that Michael Myers, the kid, disappeared on Halloween night when he killed his sister. Something took over Michael Myers at that point. He was a normal kid. All the interactions with his parents and that, hey, Michael, suggest that he was just a normal kid. And he, wanted to go trick-or-treating. His sister wanted to make out with her boyfriend. Something happened when he went trick-or-treating without her, right? And what came back to the house wasn't the little boy. It was
almost
something
like he
else.
had episodes of things trying to pull him that direction, but he was fighting it internally until it just was over. He lost the fight.
Maybe.
Killed her, and then it's gone.
Gone.
Michael's gone.
Yeah, Michael's gone. So maybe a cool thing to do would have been they're transferring him in the beginning, same scene, because I think that is an atmospheric scene. The rest of the film doesn't hold a candle to that scene. But maybe the ambulance itself crashes, and maybe one of the guards falls onto Michael, and then that guard is the new Michael. You know what I'm saying? Like, just transfer it. He has eyes again. He still wants to kill the family. Whatever. I think that what stands in the film is just kind of nonsensical. But whereas 5 has a lot of nonsensical stuff, but the whole attitude of that film is that it's not hyper real. And yeah, listen, the new bad guy kicks a dog. It's not a subtle movie, but on that level of like storytelling as fairy tale, that exaggerated story, I think it's a better film. And I know that most fans just will not embrace the film. I know that like soundtrack, having, goofy sounds when the cops make jokes. I get it. I do. But to me, I will take a failed attempt at greatness over a successful attempt at mediocrity, which is what I see the fourth film as.
That is the trappings of the Halloween franchise, though, is trying to capture the originals, but never being able to. And I think that's always the trappings, where I feel like other franchises kind of play within their set of rules for their own franchise, but take it wherever they want to. I mean, and don't really worry too much about it. I mean, I think they felt bound to bring Michael back, and they were going to do that come hell or high water. And they did. And once they did, they had just a replacement for Jamie Lee Curtis. And that was pretty much it. And again, I'm not knocking. I love this movie. I just, when I first saw that, I can't even remember, to be honest with you, when I first saw Halloween 4, because I saw the first one first, Well, not obviously. I guess at that point it could have been any of them, but I saw the first one, a rental cassette up the street, and I saw it on television, and I saw 2 after it on television that same night. So I saw 1 and 2 that night, and then I don't know what came next, to be honest with you. I fell into the trappings of not watching 3 because it didn't have the bad guy in it that I wanted to see, but 4 did capture me. It did capture me, but I think, is it weird that the 80s are so popular, but I feel like they've always been that popular to me, because when I first saw these movies, it wasn't that far into the 90s. So these were not that far in the past at all, but I still kind of had this weird 80s nostalgia, even though I was probably only 5 or 6 years past 1989 at that point. It's weird. I mean, I've always really 80s music, like I could listen to the Cars all day long. I just like that sound of music, The Cure. I don't know. I mean, there's just the 80s and that seeing that kid in the costumes running out into the hallway when they were picking on her, and I don't know. Halloween 4 just does something for me, but I can't disagree with what you're saying.
Well, I'm not trying to convert you.
Oh no.
I think so. It's a weird thing for me because I do like the 80s as a decade for horror. I do think its value is overstated overall. I think the 70s are, for the modern era, the best decade for horror. I think it was just the point where all the innovation and all of the creativity was firing at such a high level. You had truly world-class filmmakers being drawn to the genre. You had people making their bones in the genre. So they were so invested. And it was a different time to make movies. You were allowed to have longer. Money went a lot further, so you didn't necessarily need the higher budget. Whereas, like, today, you burn through money doing anything for a film. But I think the 70s, when you look at Jaws, when you look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when you look at the original Halloween, you start to look at, like, oh my God, this decade didn't just have highs. It had The Exorcist. Whereas the 80s were a different experience. We have a lot of films we love from the 80s, and we have a lot of films we like from the 80s, but the highs are not nearly as high. I mean, and especially once you get out of the first few years of the 80s, once maybe by 84, basically all the really, really Titanic titles are pretty much out of the way. And then it's a matter of sequels and variations and ripoffs, some of which are very good. I've said it a million times. I think that Bad Dreams is a better film than any of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels or remake. I just think it's on the surface just better in every way. So I'm not really picking on the last half of the decade, but I don't think there's any real innovative changes to the genre moments from about after 84.
It's weird because I think there's also when you come to something too, the age can be one thing, but also kind of the mentality paired with the age and just how something strikes you that first time you catch it. And even though your tastes may change, your feelings towards that thing that you caught at just the right time can sort of stay the same. The feelings towards it. I mean, you can defend some real turds based on those feelings you had that one time you saw it just at that right moment. I don't know. I think I'll always defend the Halloween movies just because of how near and dear they are. But there are a lot of them there that I think Halloween 6 is not a great movie, but I thought it was the scariest Halloween. I feel like there's enough there to make you jump. There's enough kind of, it's kind of, but it's nonsensical. It's completely nonsensical. I don't like H2O as much as I thought I would this many years later. Like I loved it when it first came out. I still like it. Okay. It's palatable to me, and it's not bad in any way from the standpoint of catch it here or there, but I'll watch 6 before that one 10 times out of 10. But if I'm watching any of those movies, I put in 2, the original 2. I think it's more fun. I like the hospital atmosphere, even though it's nonsensical. There's literally nobody there, but it's, there's babies laying in the nursery all by themselves with nobody around. Apparently they don't have parents, all that stuff you just let go. But I don't know. That's a franchise that I will never not love.
So while we're on the Halloween thing, and then we'll move away from Halloween, but DJ Donnelly asks, could Christopher Lee, who was John Carpenter's first choice, pull off Dr. Loomis?
Yes, I absolutely think so. Would have I wanted that, knowing what I know about Donald Pleasance? No, but we would have never known any better. And you better believe Christopher Lee would have done a dang good job. I mean, that's really the long and short of it as far as I'm concerned.
So my thing is, I love Christopher Lee. I absolutely love him. But Christopher Lee is an actor who he can sell any line of dialogue, but he can't really encapsulate an entire movie in his dialogue the way that Donald Pleasance does. Donald Pleasance owns Halloween, and he's in 9 minutes of the movie. He didn't have many days on the set. I think Christopher Lee is like one of those guys that needs a little time to breathe. So, in other words, he needs the long speech, the villain speech. He needs his moments to breathe. He needs to be around people. He needs to act off other people, which is why whenever I watch Gremlins 2, I get frustrated when he comes on, because I'm like, man, make this whole movie just Christopher Lee and the Gremlins. I love Gremlins 2, and I don't want to lose anything else, but when those scenes come on, I'm like, it's Christopher goddamn Lee. Let's do that movie. Let's do that movie. So in a way, I think for what Halloween is, Donald Pleasance was a brilliant, brilliant choice. There's other people who could have done it, and been just as successful, I think. But Lee J. Cobb would have been an awesome Loomis. But we got to look at the fact that sometimes the big horror guys who are established already aren't the best choices. You want to go with character actors who are willing and up for it, but are not as well established in the genre. Pleasance had already done a few genre films before that, certainly, and he'd do many, many afterwards. But at that time, he was considered a little bit of an odd choice, the same way Betsy Palmer was a very odd choice for Friday the 13th. But I wouldn't change Betsy Palmer out for anyone at this point.
No. And at that point in her career, she might as well have been doing a porn movie. I mean, the way people treated her for taking that movie, because it kind of carried that same stigma for her. But man, she owns it. And like you said about Loomis, I mean, she's not in the movie very long at all.
Friday the 13th and Betsy Palmer is one of the subjects that I don't think people have really good context around. It's because everyone looks and go, why did the critics go so hard after her for making a slasher film? I mean, honestly, they didn't attack Donald Pleasance for doing Halloween. They didn't attack, Olivia Hussey for Black Christmas, right? So what was it about Friday 13th? And here it is, guys. All those films were independent. The distribution was independent. It was not treated like studio film. Paramount took Friday the 13th and launched it big, and they treated it to all the perks that a mainstream production got. That was the threat. It had nothing to do with Betsy Palmer. They needed to sink this movie because that was a scary paradigm shift. Suddenly, the blood and guts guys from Connecticut were getting into every Cineplex in the country and doing well. And every mainstream critic did not want that to happen because they all had rosy, idealistic views of old-time Hollywood that they wanted to protect. They didn't want change. They didn't want a democracy on that marketplace. So they took it out on Betsy Palmer, which is reprehensible, but it's completely where they're at. They were even hiding behind the moralizing on the film because those guys all gave good reviews to films that were far more violent, far more morally ambiguous. Look for the Straw Dogs reviews. That movie is a lot tougher than Friday the 13th. But difference was Paramount bought Friday the 13th for distribution and treated it like an equal. And that could not be tolerated. Sorry, that was my soapbox moment. That happens at least once an episode.
It's a good one. She's worth defending, that's for sure.
I loved meeting her twice. She was amazing. Yeah. That's the poster behind me, which you can't see the signature, but that's one of my prized possessions because she's on it. So how about that? Do you do the convention thing? Do you try and meet celebrities? Any of that have any appeal?
It's been a long time. I can't tell. I think I haven't been to one since my son was 2. And I took him on a Sunday, and I had Kane Hodder strangle him because I thought it would be pretty funny having a toddler getting strangled by Jason. So I went and did that. But before that, I did a lot of the Days of the Dead shows that went to Indianapolis, and did a couple horror hounds here in Cincinnati. And yeah, I like them a lot, but I usually like going more towards the vendor areas and, stuff like that, just seeing what people bring to the tables and that sort of thing. It did become more challenging to go to them because of, people were asking more, but they were getting more. So I'm not going to knock them for that. If if people are willing to pay, they're worth it, right?
To a degree.
If they think they're worth it, they put it on their sign and they've got a line, then to somebody they're worth it. But it just wasn't necessarily for me. I would rather have a picture with the person than them sign something for me, because I don't have a ton of space to put things up. Now I do have like an album book that I have with some photos with some signatures on it and stuff like that. But I have John Carpenter and Dean Cundy on Betamax tape of Halloween. That's one. I mean, I would do that 10 times over again if I was given the choice. But yeah, I do like going to conventions, but usually if they have like a film festival or something attached to them, I'm more drawn towards that.
I wish I could be drawn to the film festival aspect of it, but I seem to go to them and it's like things that are shot on iPhones today, and nothing against iPhones as a format, but in the hands of a great filmmaker, doesn't matter what you shoot on. But I think the ease of filmmaking is one of those things that drives me nuts today, because I love democracy. I love having a lot of voices out there. But when you watch three things and you're trying to be charitable, but they're not great, I kind of turn off. And I know I miss out on a lot of great stuff that's out there made on the amateur level, but man, I can't stomach too much of that stuff. So I usually spend about 40 minutes, see maybe 3 or 4 shorts, and usually I bail.
It's nice to go around and try to follow, if you know ahead of time what's going to be showing, and see what the presence online is, like the social media for some of these things can be, because you get a feel for what you might be in for. Not story or any of that sort of thing. Obviously, you don't want to ruin a movie for you potentially, but if you see some behind the scenes shots and things like that, it doesn't take you long to figure out what you're talking about, but yeah, I've seen some really interesting stuff. I will tell you that. I saw a movie one time that filmed apparently grandma's dentures in their soaking container for, I'm not kidding, it was 45 seconds in a row, not cutting away to anything else. I have no idea what it had to do with the plot of the story at all, but there were her dentures. So, that was real fun.
And what drives me crazy is that I almost feel like all these guys, like, they're driven. I mean, they completed a project, and I want to applaud everyone, no matter how good or bad something comes out, for taking on a project, seeing it through to completion, standing up and taking questions from an audience that doesn't know what to ask you. I give all those people all the props in the world. I'm a guy who sat behind a table with books in front of me and waited for people to show up at the bookstore. I know how horrifying it can be when it feels like no one cares. I've also been surprised when a line forms, but it's been more of the latter and less of the former, right? So I would just say, like, I don't want to put anyone down, but here's the thing. You look at something like Never Hike Alone, made for nominally more money than a lot of these small productions that I have to leave after 40 minutes of seeing. And you realize that it's this, all this technology is an opportunity for people to be that new voice that I'm so desperate to find. Don't cut yourself short. If you're out there and you hear my message, spend the time. Make sure the screenplay is real tight before you cast a role. When you're going to cast, say no to those friends that can't act.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And just run an ad online. Go to Craigslist, say you're looking for actors. And you know what? Do auditions. It's okay, even though you're not paying them. Next thing, just be upfront with everyone about what you got on your hand. Don't oversell it. Watch your film dispassionately. If you got a film that is a lot of fun, but would be better at half its length, cut it to half its length.
Sound. My goodness, sound will take a good idea and kill it in a hurry. If you're just absolutely, one scene, you're like, oh my God, and the next scene you're like, what was that? I didn't catch that. Like, and that's on a good day. Sometimes it's just you never hear anything at all, or it's mic'd so improperly that some people are on a mic and some people are not on a mic. I mean, it just, the sound will kill something so fast too. And I don't know how people miss that. I know I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't want to knock anybody. Like you said, I mean, they're out there getting it done, but get a mic on them, because it's a waste if you don't.
And it's just a matter of like, I'm the biggest supporter of everyone out there creating something. Every writer out there who picks up a blank sheet of paper and puts words on it, and it creates something that's never existed before, I'm your fan. I am. I just am. Even if you write in a genre that I don't give a crap about, I am your fan for doing that. Every filmmaker, every musician, I am your fan. I'm your biggest supporter for going out there and trying something. But do me a favor. Help me support you. Mm-hmm. Cross your T's, dot your I's. And then I want to be like you. I want to spend hours in the screening room at the convention instead of wandering the convention floor, realizing that I paid $30 to enter a convention, that I probably am leaving in 20 minutes, which is not a great cost to return ratio when it comes down to it.
I've been there. Yeah, you're right.
So what have been the recent films? We have to end this on a positive note. We can't possibly end it right there.
I like that.
So what in it doesn't have to be a film. It could be a film, television, book, music. What right now is blowing wind up your skirt? What are you excited about and want to scream out?
Well, I'm looking forward to reading this, but I haven't yet, so I can't speak to it. But I did just read, and I know it's crazy, but I did just read The Shining for the first time. Of course, I had seen the movie, but I never read the book. And I could see there's obviously some beef between Kubrick and King for other reasons. But I can see what King's saying, because I like that aspect of Jack was really trying. Like, he didn't go into this already, 2 feet over the edge, already falling down the mountainside. He was pushed over it in the movie. And I feel like he was really fighting to be what he intended to be, which I think a lot of people can relate to. I know I can relate to it, because you look back on a day and think, wow, I screwed X, Y, and Z up, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. And I think Jack's like that guy in the book. Like in the novel, Jack is, I'm going to make it right. That was stupid. I made a huge mistake, but tomorrow is the first step towards a better, outlook. Whereas in the movie, it's good. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a classic, but Jack's a nut when he steps foot into the Overlook for the first time, and prior, he's psycho. So there's no, I don't want to say character development and growth. You just know what you're getting. They're not pulling any punches. From block one, this guy is going to get cooped up in this place, and they're all in trouble. So I don't know. That's the one though that I can't believe I waited that long to see. I really enjoyed that read. That was one that went a lot faster than I thought it was going to, because like I said, I mean, these short stories here from Kathy I'm looking forward to, because you can take little bites, but that's a novel. I kind of had to hunker down and go after it, but it was worth it. No doubt.
Yeah. The Shining's a weird one for me, because I actually saw the film before I read the book. Even though we're talking early 80s, it just had more to do with my age. My parents would buy me any book I want and encourage me to read it, no matter what the content was. But film, it was a wait and see type thing. They needed to know a little bit. Although they were pretty liberal, I will say. I can't complain there. But The Shining is a book about child abuse, and I think Kubrick was just all in on that angle, and King wanted to tell a story that had a lot more going on and a lot more that was a lot more robust. And I just think Kubrick understood that he didn't have the room for it. So I mean, the most horrifying scene in The Shining is the scene in which Jack Nicholson has his son on his lap, and he's not really communicating with his son. It's just an awkward moment that goes on way too long.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And that's the soul of the movie. That's the horror of the movie. It's not typewritten pages showing you that Jack's gone insane. It's that this guy is doing horrible things to his kid, and that's why the kid projects an idea of a naked woman in a room having torn his shirt. But it's interesting because Shelley Duvall's character knows what's really going on, and she lets you know that she knows what's going on. When he said, when your kid comes to you and says that there's a woman in a room that did something to you, her first thing is to do is confront her husband. She knows what's going on. And it's not about having broken his arm in the past, which I think is probably code as well. It's a very dark subject matter for a film, which very smartly doesn't state it outright. But that's only part of what King was doing in the novel. So King felt like this, it shortcut me. I would argue something was getting shortcut in adaptation to film.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We got a brilliant film. Let's chalk that up for the win it is, and stop belly aching about what wasn't there, because I don't like the miniseries version at all. I
need to watch that just to see, because I have no point of reference on that. But there's just more beef there between those two guys.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it. There's behind the scenes beef there, because out of all the King adaptations that he's pumped, I think he should pushing that one.
Yeah, that's always the weird thing with King too, is that I think he's been abnormally lucky in film, especially with the early years. I mean, you had De Palma, Cronenberg, Kubrick. I mean, who gets Carpenter? Who gets these opportunities to have like the top names in the genre, and even people who normally wouldn't work in the genre adapt you? That's amazing. That's. And then, but then later, he's more proud of a lot of the television work and a lot of the films that I consider incredibly lesser. So that's always been a disconnect with me, and I don't really know what that's about, except maybe it's hard to judge your own work when it's been translated. I've never had that problem to deal with. So,
I mean, yeah, Joe Bob had a lot to say last week about with Exorcist 3 and Blatty and all of that tension that was there and things that were left out of the book to be brought to the movie, and how the second one was such an abomination and bringing it back, and then the third one had so much book influence in it and things like that from
Legion.
Legion. And I'm like, that it's nice hearing things like that, because you understand the other side of the coin. But I can also see why the filmmaker decided to make a film out of it. I mean, a film has to be made out of it. There's a reason why the novel is the novel. So I don't know. And I'll be honest, I'm just not down to sit for a 3-hour horror movie. 90 to 20 is good for me.
Well, I would argue, since we're talking about the dark emotions, no one is really down for spending 3 hours peering down their own throat. Yeah. Which is basically what a horror film is asking you to do. It's like, you are what you ate, so let's show you what you ate.
Yep.
And I agree with that. I think sometimes I'd be okay with 2 hours. But even that, I get kind of angsty.
Yeah.
I think that 90-minute mark is probably perfect.
That's the sweet spot. I mean, it just seems like that's the sweet spot, really, for a lot of movies for me. But again, I told you about my attention span. That could be a big part of it. But I think especially a horror movie, you just kind of want to, not that you don't want to enjoy more of a good thing, but sometimes that's when it gets into the territory of not being so good anymore. Say what you have to say in as few words as possible.
All right. So, Mr. MacNugget, ask me what I have coming up on the show next.
You want me to ask you what you have coming up on your show?
I absolutely want you to do that.
Okay. Well, Lauren, what does the audience of Visited by Voices Live have to look forward to next week?
Funny that you should ask. So, on Tuesday, not Monday, my normal day, I will be joined by Jeremy Graham, who's a professional gaffer who's worked on insane number of films you're aware of, everything from Welcome to the Dollhouse to many of the Kevin Smith films. He worked with Joe Dante on Burying the Ex. He'll be joining me to talk about what a gaffer does and tell a lot of Hollywood stories. And as an added bonus, he'll probably embarrass me because I grew up with Jeremy. We went to high school together, saw some punk rock shows at City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey, Airport Music Hall in Allentown. So he'll have something, I'm sure, to dredge up to make me blush. So it'll be a fun night. Lots of stories about people that you know in the business pertaining to the horror genre, and we'll be back in the world of film. So I think that'll be exciting for my audience, who I realize that probably film is probably their stalwart place they get horror.
Without a doubt, that'd be exciting.
So where can people reach you, and what final words do you have to say to the many chatters who are talking about everything from U2 to Nightmare on Elm Street to comments that I don't think I can read on the air?
Hey, I'm not surprised to hear you say that. Actually, the new show, it's audio, so you can catch it on any of your favorite places you get podcasts. So you can go to anchor.fm/Mister-MacNugget. Okay, and spell it just like Lauren did in the description for this show here. Or Google Podcasts, iTunes, all those places you get podcasts, look for it there, Mister MacNugget Show. And I'd encourage you guys to listen to it. You can leave me voice messages on the Anchor site that I gave you there, the anchor.fm/Mister-MacNugget, and I can put them in the show. So, I mean, I'd be glad to hear what you have to say, and hopefully I can have Lauren on sometime. We could chat about some different angles in the world of horror and what makes his mind tick. I've got some ideas swimming around already.
It's just one marble I swallowed as a child that went the wrong way. It just rattles.
Well, we'll just let it rattle and repeat then sometime. Maybe we'll do like a 6-hour long marathon. Does that sound good?
I'll have to attach a catheter, but that's fine.
Okay. All right, cool.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on and dealing with my madness and telling us about the initial early years of the podcast, because I find that stuff just outrageously awesome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. I will see everyone on Tuesday. Please spread the word. If you're not subscribed, do that. That really matters to me. I care. All right. Thanks. Have a great rest of your weekend and enjoy your Monday in peace and solidarity.
He's a very old guy, knows a lot about horror.